Hundreds of Black Lives Matter activists have been arrested across the nation as public opinion turns decisively against them. In this video, we're going to take a look at the hundreds, and I do mean hundreds of arrests, as the Trump administration is indeed cracking down on these Democrat-ruined cities. And we're going to see how the latest polls show that the vast majority of Americans are rejecting Black Lives Matter and their radical Marxist agenda. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone, patriots across the globe. Dr. Steve here with you. Back in the office, as you can see, from our wonderful vacation with my family in the Outer Banks last week. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It was an absolutely beautiful vacation. But now we are back and ready to analyze current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends, so that you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you're brand new to this channel and you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. We'd love to have you as a regular part of this channel, where each and every day we together get to celebrate the inevitable collapse of left-wing globalism, and it is collapsing, and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age. Now, before we dive into things here, you know, our health and our patience have really been challenged over the last several months, to say the least, right? And the sponsors of our video want to do something about that. And they put together a mega antioxidant called ESS60, which is actually being called a miracle molecule because people sleep better and enjoy more energy and mental focus with a simple spoonful in the morning. You can mix it in your salad, you can rub it on a steak, or even dip it in your bread in it. It's amazing. ESS60 comes in 3 delicious organic oils: olive, avocado, and MCT coconut. It's an amazing blend that supports your immune system with powerful antioxidant and antiviral properties, which actually delivers more than 172 times the power of vitamin C. That's why we call it a miracle molecule. You're absolutely going to love it. Now, to make it even better, if you click on that link below today, you can get $10 off the regular price. So don't wait. Click on that link below or go to c60perfect.com and get your ESS60 oil direct from the lab today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. We've been reporting over the last several weeks now that we are indeed seeing a massive backlash against the Black Lives Matter rioters and looters, who the mainstream Marxist media consistently refer to as peaceful protesters. You know, even though CNN's borderline illiterate Chris Cuomo asked rhetorically, whoever said that protests have to be peaceful? Remember, this is what we're dealing with the mainstream Marxist media here, these liberal activists disguised as journalists. They say out of one side of their mouths that protests can most certainly and justifiably turn violent. And on the other side of their mouths, they'll blame an armed couple in St. Louis for defending themselves and their house from the very protest violence that this media was championing. It's insane. This is the mainstream Marxist media. But try as they may, these hecklers disguised as reporters have not been able to convince the vast majority of the American population to side with the rioters and looters, the so-called peaceful protesters that have ravaged America's cities. The latest Rasmussen poll has found that nearly 70% of Americans definitively opposed to funding the police, 66% to be exact. That's up from 59% in early June. A mere 23% favored defunding the cops. Americans are clearly, overwhelmingly on the side of law enforcement. Check this one out. This is fascinating. Another study found that Americans actually believe that blacks are more racist than anyone else. Now, how's that for something you don't hear on the mainstream media? Rasmussen found that 25% of respondents believe that most black Americans are indeed racist. That compares to the 18% who say they think most white Americans are racist, and the 15% that believe that most Hispanic Americans are racist, and only 13% see Asians as generally racist. After all the virtue signaling from CNN and MSNBC, after all the pathetic pandering from our globalist corporations, including Chick-fil-A, by the way, shame on you, Chick-fil-A. After all the nonsense spewed out about systemic racism and the like, as it turns out, most Americans consider blacks to be the single most racist group in the nation. And things get even worse. In fact, when given a choice on which is more important, Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, 59% of respondents said All Lives Matter was more important. Only 30% stand behind Black Lives Matter. You get to see the pattern there? 30% BLM, 23% want to defend or defund the police. Most people think blacks are more racist than anyone else. So Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, things aren't going the way you hoped they were. Now, as for the hundreds of arrests of Black Lives Matter activists sweeping the nation, this is really going to blow your mind. Let's start in the great state of Texas. Again, astonishing stuff. This actually happened a month ago, but it went unreported. It actually just came out, it seems, in the last few weeks. You may not have heard this, but nearly 700 protesters were arrested on West Dallas Bridge as they were blocking a major highway there in Texas. Now, interestingly enough, the police chief there in Dallas, she's a black woman by the name of Renee Hall. She warned the protesters not to block the bridge. And when they did, she sent a police force that showed up and put 647 of these protesters in zip tie handcuffs. Here's what the police chief said after the arrest. Quote, "We warned them, if you break the law, we will arrest you. There are many who question and are not happy with the decisions that I made on yesterday. Let me be clear, I am not here to make people happy. My job and our job in law enforcement is to keep this city safe. We have pledged that. We will do that. And that is our goal." Close quote. Amen and amen. If every lawmaker, politician, and law enforcement officer made that same commitment, we simply would not be having these Democrat-defended riots and destructions going on throughout our nation. It wouldn't be happening. Now, this situation in Texas seems to have been the tip of the iceberg in terms of arrests of BLM activists. Just the other day in Seattle, 45 Black Lives Matter rioters were arrested. It was one of the biggest BLM rallies in weeks, and it, of course, degenerated into violence. And as they're losing the support of the vast majority of the population, we can actually expect these so-called protests to become even more violent as frustration takes over. 21 police officers were injured in the clash. Several federal law enforcement members were involved in cracking down on the violence as part of President Trump's efforts of restoring law and order to the nation's Democrat-ruined cities. Going on over to Portland, several arrests were made last night in the latest round of riots that have decimated that city. A Nike store was vandalized and heavily damaged in the process. In Louisville, Kentucky, police confronted over 100 BLM protesters after they blocked off one of their major streets. All in all, 76 activists were arrested by Louisville police. Several protesters were charged with assault for throwing bottles at police officers who've, of course, been getting injured in this process. And you ready for this? This is fascinating. Now, in Maricopa County, Arizona, if you're an illegal immigrant under DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program under Obama, if you're arrested and you're a DACA recipient, that's it. You're deported. You're kicked out of the country. And that is precisely what's going on as we speak for at least one BLM activist, something that the leftist Marxists over at the New York Times are utterly incensed about. Now, like I mentioned, I think this kind of violence that we see coming from these BLM activists is just going to become par for the course as they realize more and more that they've lost the support of the vast majority of the country. You probably heard about this left-wing BLM activist who was actually shot and killed after he allegedly pointed his AK-47 at a motorist. This was in Austin, Texas. It happened just the other day, but you had all these protesters shutting down a major street, right, which of course what we're seeing all over the place now. And a motorist was trying to get through the mob that was gathered there, and apparently this fellow by the name of Garrett Foster, he's a BLM radical. He had an AK-47. He pointed it at the guy in the car, and the guy in the car turned around and shot him. And again, as I understand it, this guy in the car was questioned by police, and he was released. He's seen as perfectly within his rights to defend himself against these BLM activists who have proven to be very, very violent. And again, I think that this violence is only going to escalate. Of course, I don't know that for certain, but I think that once frustration starts setting in, because they've so upped the ante on this with all the cheerleading from the mainstream Marxist media, left-wing activists disguised as journalists, with all of their, hoping and wishing that the Black Lives Matter movement would finally bring President Trump down with this woke nation. The loss of American support is only going to intensify that rage and increase the susceptibility towards violence, which, of course, in turn, will only further alienate the BLM movement from the vast majority of the American people. And this kind of violence is already turning off 60 to 70% of the nation. I mean, give me a break. What do you think an escalation of this violence is going to do? So I think really we're seeing the beginning of the end of the BLM movement. Now, granted, the mainstream Marxist media will continue to splash them across the screen as this peaceful protest movement fighting gallantly for social justice and the like, but that's increasingly becoming nothing more than a parallel universe, and I think most people recognize that. Most people recognize that the mainstream media is a bunch of left-wing activists disguised as journalists, that they really are nothing more than a propaganda wing for all things leftist liberal, and most of the population isn't buying it anymore. And again, we've got the studies, the polls that bear this out. But make no mistake, as of now, we are indeed seeing BLM activists getting arrested all over the nation. And as public opinion increasingly turns against them, we can only expect that those arrests really are just beginning. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on armed militias rising up as leftist rioters are utterly destroying themselves. You're not going to want to miss this one. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.